Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
And I am sitting before you today, not as someone who has done some amazing things in the migraine community, but I sit beside you as a fellow patient. My advocacy journey began about 6 years ago. I had been diagnosed as a chronic migraine patient as a number of years before that, and I had been diagnosed with intracranial hypertension prior to that as well. But this new diagnosis of intracranial hypertension and the prospect of what would turn out to be multiple neurosurgeries for this rare headache disorder pushed me into advocacy. Once you make the decision to become an advocate, hopefully in the migraine and headache community, but it could be within the broader pain community or the healthcare community, find your passion and your advocacy niche. It could be access, cost of medications, finding care, patient education, public education, governmental realization, social media awareness. The list goes on and on. My personal passion is in patient education and access to therapies and physicians. As an RN, I decided a few years back to go back to school and to work on my master's in nursing education. I wanted this degree so that I would know how to work with adult learners and communicate health information to the public as well as to migraine patients on a different level. I knew that it would add to my advocacy journey as well. I delved into this program of study, not realizing that my IH would progress to the point where I'm no longer able to work as a nurse or within the headache community, but I am still doing my advocacy work. My advocacy journey continued to expand when I attended conferences for patients. Yes, those two exist. It's kind of funny. A lot of times conferences are for providers or nurses only, and they don't include patients. And that was really concerning for me. It actually made my blood boil when I was a patient and couldn't get into these conferences without my nursing degree behind me. So having these patient conferences has been absolutely crucial for me to expand my advocacy and expand my work. I decided to join patient advocacy groups in hopes of not only disseminating information to people, but rather bring all views to the table. The welcoming that I received from the various advocacy groups has been absolutely astounding. They welcome me with open arms. It's a community here. We absolutely find each other and find a common bond. There's a common bond in pain. There's a common bond in migraine attacks. There's a common bond in chronic illness. And all those bonds really make things a lot stronger. This sense of welcoming was so encouraging and really helped me to expand my outlook as to what advocacy can really mean. Now, I'm one of those thinkers that's kind of a go big or go home. So my first foray into major advocacy was actually Headache on the Hill, which is a program in Washington, D.C., as Dr. Arca had spoken about earlier, where you go and you speak to your local and state and national legislators about headache disorders and the need for things like increased funding, oxygen for cluster headache patients, things that seem so basic but yet aren't covered by insurance. It was a unbelievable experience. I try to go every other year now to Headache on the Hill. Every year is a little rough because of all the walking and activity, but it is an absolutely worthwhile event that you can go to and participate in. We encourage people from all 50 states to come, and we really try to get the representation going from different genders, different headache disorders, and telling your story. You come up with an elevator pitch, is what they call it, where you tell your story in about 5 minutes or less. And you talk to the legislators and you let them know, hey, this is me. I'm a constituent of yours, and I'm having issues and I'm having problems. Or this is how you can help. So it's really important. A few years ago, Dr. Shapiro did his headache elevator pitch to Stephen Colbert in the elevator, and that was featured on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, and that just cracked me up to see him talking to a famous person, giving a speech about headache disorders and saying, here you go, here's my card. Needless to say, with the help and reassurance of my fellow attendees at Headache on the Hill, became very comfortable giving the speech and giving my story and letting my story be heard. And really had a blast becoming attached to the migraine community. Um, I learned from my fellow attendees about different headache disorders and was able to tell my story about intracranial hypertension, which tends to be a rare headache disorder. Headache on the Hill and other advocacy programs, such as those offered by Miles for Migraine or the National Headache Foundation, not only allow you to advocate for yourself, but it's an opportunity to network and to get to know other people and to know that, you know, your struggle, somebody else is going through it too. And it's sometimes just that little bit of reassurance that somebody else is having similar problems. That can be a real lifeline. I have made the most amazing friends, some of which are joining me here today because of my migraine journey. It's always a welcome phrase to hear, I understand how you are feeling today, not from a stranger, but from somebody else who's actually going through the same thing you are. Just hearing those words is really reaffirming and reassuring to know that there is somebody else on the other side who's looking out for you and who understands what you're going through. And although Headache on the Hill is an amazing event, and I encourage everybody to apply and to look into it, there are smaller advocacy and educational opportunities that you can do that have just as much impact. I work as a moderator on some Facebook groups. There's a local group, the Phoenix Migrainers, that I do moderation for, as well as some larger Facebook groups that have thousands of people. This has been a really welcome way for me to get involved as an advocate because I can do it on my own time, in my own space. I call it my bat cave, which is just a very dark room, but where I can use my computer in peace and quiet. Also, it keeps me active in the migraine community and meeting more people and getting my story out and hearing their story and reassuring them has been really valid and very important for me. You can post on your own Facebook and Instagram pages about migraine, about your experience, and posting about things that come up in the media has been really interesting as well. There's a couple, last year there was a famous migraine pose that came into existence on Instagram, where people were doing this pose on Instagram and saying how it made their face look slimmer. And that was kind of a shock to the migraine community because it was almost a put down. So really educating people about that and things like that have been really positive for me. Another funny story that I like to tell is that I was really involved on Twitter. And I was involved actually not through headache and migraine disorders, but through my dog. At the time I had a pug. And I was working on a Twitter account and posting about my dog. And I would post about migraine every once in a while and about intracranial hypertension. And I got to know a woman from New Zealand. And we were talking and we started having these conversations about migraine and headaches and things like that. And she ended up getting diagnosed with intracranial hypertension after I was. And like Katie said, this is a disease that affects 1 in 100,000 people worldwide. So it's a rare one. So having this connection that we had already made on Twitter, not originally through a headache disorder or a headache, commonality, but through our dogs of all things, really helped make her feel okay and reaffirmed and reassured her. And we've been in contact ever since, and we are pen pals, and we're always on Twitter and always on Facebook. And you never know who your story can affect or will impact. I have come to realize that my journey is not over. I am currently looking at continuing my education in headache disorders and advocacy. When I decided to obtain my master's, it was not easy being a patient and a student at the same time because I was trying to work at the same time as well. But I was actually writing my thesis from the neuro ICU here at Barrows in Phoenix, and my neurosurgeon was chastising me for that one. I don't recommend doing that at all, without a doubt. But I'm pleased to really have found my advocacy voice and to found my voice as a patient and as a nurse and as a patient advocate through the various groups here that are available. And, if you have any questions about advocacy, feel free to reach out. We are more than welcome and we are more than happy to to listen and to give you advice and to just be there for you. That's our main goal. So I have a short little PowerPoint. Let's see if we can do this as seamlessly as possible. Let's see here. Okay, did that work?
Yep, it's coming up right now.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. It's just going to take 1 second.
Sure.
Okay, so this is a prescription for advocacy. Your advocacy needs to be part of your treatment plan. As a migraine patient, being an advocate is going to be part of what you have to learn to do. So here's a little quick poll that we can do about what type of migraine you have. If you are a migraine patient, I know some of you may not be, and if this is your first time in an online or Zoom event. Just give it 1 second. Okay. Did it come through?
Yes.
Beautiful. Okay, so wow, 78% of us here do have chronic migraine. 11%, this is your first virtual or Zoom event, which is awesome. It's one of my first ones as well. It's not my first, but as a presenter, it's my first. And 50% have attended a previous Miles for Migraine event. 6% are episodic migraine, 6% are cluster headache, and 6% of you are caregivers for migraine and headache disorder patients as well. So that's awesome to hear, and welcome everybody. Okay. So this is my little story a little bit, and I want to thank Katie Golden, who is another migraine advocate, for helping me with the PowerPoint. She's a PowerPoint guru, and for submitting some of her pictures as well as my pictures for the PowerPoint. So I was diagnosed with episodic migraine without aura at age 6. The migraine that never ended. I went from episodic to chronic as a high schooler. I went to high school here in Phoenix at Xavier and was chronic all through high school. Started Botox about age 16 and progressed into a daily headache that pretty much never ended. At about age 30 or so, I'm now 38, but at age 30, I was diagnosed with intracranial hypertension, also known as pseudotumor cerebri. It does have 2 different names, but intracranial hypertension is the more accepted name for that. I am currently always in some level of pain. Unfortunately, my headaches don't go away, no matter what I do. I've gotten them under better control, and I've learned to manage and to cope and to live with it, but I am always in some level of pain. And I also do advocacy with Headache on the Hill through Advocacy 101. So diagnosed at age 6, for me, it takes about 2 to 3 times the average length of time to complete a task. If somebody can read a book in an hour, it's going to take me 2 to 3 hours to read the book, if I can even get through the book. I do a lot of books on tape now because reading has become extremely difficult for me. And my chronic migraine, along with the intracranial hypertension, age 32 is the first time I went on Social Security disability. I was able to get off of it for a number of years by doing their Ticket to Work program and worked as a case manager full time. But recently, age 36 is the last time I was able to work full time as a nurse, which has been extremely devastating for me as somebody who's always worked. Not being able to work because of headache disorders is very complex and very exhausting. So here's some stages of grief. They always say grief isn't linear, and it's not. I go through the stages of grief still. A lot of times the first stage of grief is denial, then anger, then bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And even now, I've gotten to the acceptance point, but then something will come up and I'll go back into the anger and denial mode. So my experience is not linear. It is very, very, very convoluted. Healing isn't linear. When you heal and you go and you face your reality, it's not going to be a smooth course. It may be very convoluted and very messy, but that's okay. Migraine in a word from migraine.com. A lot of people contributed words for this: debilitating, pain, misery, hell, devastating, torture, awful, excruciating. But there are also positive words I think that you can get out of migraine and migraine disorders. I have found strength through my migraine disorders. I have found hope, and I have found community in those. So the words that you come up with don't always have to be negative. They can also be positive at the same time. Now let's take a moment to realize that the migraine thief has taken something from us. If you're a chronic migraine patient or an episodic migraine patient or a caregiver to somebody with migraine. Grief is not a disorder, a disease or sign of weakness. It is an emotional, physical, and spiritual necessity. The price you pay for the love only cure for. Grief is to grieve, and that's Earl Grolman. These are some great pictures about what migraine has stolen from people. These are my friends, Sydney, Jill, and Jamie. We each wrote down, and we've all done this, about what migraine has stolen from them. In things like livelihood, time with family, my teenage years, my experience, the high school experience, all things that have been stolen from these amazing warrior advocates. Never let your pain go to waste. When chronic illness strikes, our lives, our dreams, our relationships change dramatically without having a say. Friends leave, relationships crumble, careers disappear, and ambitions or dreams are no longer attainable. Finding the new you, though, is a possibility, and a new purpose takes going through a grieving process. But don't get stuck in one phase of the grieving process without growing. Growth is possible. So advocacy as part of your treatment plan. Join an event like Dr. Arant has said. Do the Miles for Migraine, one run, walk, or relax event. It's so much fun. I go and relax and volunteer. A lot of people run or walk and grab family members and community groups and make a whole party of it. Purple is, of course, the color of migraine awareness. So there's lots of purple wigs and purple tutus out. There's also community support groups that Miles for Migraine offers, the National Headache Foundation offers. I'll be starting to facilitate a group here in Phoenix as well. And then there's Retreat Migraine. This year it's virtual, but normally it's in person. And this will be 2020 is the second year, 2021, which will hopefully be in person, will be the third year. And that's a great event where you go and meet with other migraine patients and other caregivers. And you really get to learn about migraine disorders, complementary therapies, all sorts of fun things. And in a really cool community event. Last year it was in San Antonio. It was supposed to be in LA this year. And I'm not sure where it's going to be in 2021, but we shall see. You can also contribute your talents, which are really crucial. You all have something innate in you that you can contribute. You can volunteer. You can moderate online like I do. You can contribute graphic design, grant writing. Find a niche and exploit your talents. We know that you have them, and we really appreciate it when you donate them. Submit your story. The National Headache Foundation runs stories. Migraine.com runs stories. The Invisible Project through the U.S. Pain Foundation, which I was part of for their third edition, publishes stories about migraine patients. Write an op-ed in the newspaper. It may seem a little unusual to do that, but tell your story and say, migraine is really underfunded and we really need help. And tell one person what you did today, how you can make a difference. I'll tell anybody, that will listen about my migraine story. And it doesn't matter if it's my hairdresser or a friend, just how you can make a difference is really crucial. Do some social media outreach, call to action. We've done this with oxygen recently for cluster headache patients. There's online support groups, publicize those. The National Migraine and Headache Awareness Month, which is every June. We always do blog posts and writing events and photo challenges and things like that, just to get the awareness out there. And there's Chronic Pain Awareness Month, which is in September every year. This is educate yourself in your daily life. Learn about it, talk about it, learn migraine. Change your language surrounding migraine. It's a migraine attack, just like a asthma attack. You're not a migrainer. You are a person with migraine. I have dyed my hair purple. It's a little faded now, but my purple hair don't care. I wear that with pride because that is the color of migraine advocacy. And if people ask, oh, why is your hair purple? I say, well, I get chronic migraine, and this is the color for migraine awareness. And just to kind of branch out a little bit more and have some fun with it. This is, how do you respond to advice? Migraine is a neurological disease. It is a condition that affects the entire body. Migraines exist on a spectrum. Each person's experience is different. There is no cure, but you can manage the condition. And again, migraine attack. It's hard for me to change my language, and I've really focused on that. Just like asthma, just like anything else, it's an attack, and it is an all-encompassing neurological condition. Take action to change policy. Headache on the Hill, testify, write letters. Really get involved with politics. It can be fun if that's your thing. If that's not your thing, that's okay too. Totally understand. There's the CHAMP, which is a coalition for headache and migraine patients, which can be found at headachemigraine.org. And they are a coalition of many different headache and migraine groups, patient advocacy groups that have all come together and work on education and awareness. Your illness is invisible, but you are not. I see you, we see you. Thank you very much, and I would like to hand it back over.
I love that. That was great. Thank you so much. Advocacy is so important. What a great job, and you are so great for everything you do, and especially trying to do all those things at one time. You are a champ, literally. So let me see what people have said. One of the attendees asked how we connect with patient conferences. CHAMP is a good way, right, to find out about all those conferences. They have great education resources there on their website. Do you have any other suggestions for that?
Retreat Migraine, I think, is a really good one. I think that's really kind of taken over the space of a lot of the patient conferences as well. Okay. So Retreat Migraine is something that I would look into as well.
Okay, great. Well, I think that was a great presentation, and everybody should have some advocacy suggestions for them for today. We want to let you know that all the presentations are up on our website under the education days. You should see all the presentations, as well as if you go onto YouTube under Miles for Migraine, you will actually see the presentations. I'm sorry, I meant the slides are on our website, but the presentations are under on our YouTube site under Miles for Migraine. So I want to thank all of our amazing presenters and sponsors for today. Don't forget about our virtual Run, Walk, Relax events, our virtual support groups, and of course our mindfulness events on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So thank you everybody for joining us today. Thank you again to our speakers. Everyone have a great weekend.